talk about your stuff. Hey, everybody. We are live on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter right now. This is Sean Vittor with the Lights Camera Pro podcast. I'm here with Jenin Gonzalez. Is it Jenin?
Jenin, like
Jenin
Jenin juice.
Gonzalez?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jenin.
Jenin.
Jenin, okay. He is a stunt performer. He does martial arts. He does stuff with fire. He's an actor. He's a really great guy. We're going to talk to him about all of that and watch some of his videos. And he does parkour. Right now, we're just going to get to a couple of partners and sponsors. So, for some reason, my throat is really dry. I'm going to drink some water. I think it's all the pollen in the air in Atlanta. We're both in Atlanta.
Hmm.
So I'm going to start this ad and talk over it. Restream is a platform that will send a software that will send your live video to multiple platforms, up to 30 or 40. It's very cool. I'm using it now to go to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and eventually LinkedIn. I'm partnering with them. They're letting me use their software for free, and it's very cool software. And then Ecamm, you can see over here in the other side of the screen, the logo. I just have a affiliate link on the Facebook Live and YouTube Live pages that you can go and check them out. This is the software I'm using to record this interview, and it's amazing because you can use sound effects like applause. You can use videos, which we'll show later. We've got some lower thirds here. There's all kinds of stuff. You can do multiple cameras. It's like having your own TV studio. So check out Ecamm's referral affiliate link, and then Restream, we have a referral link if you want to check that out in the Facebook post also. So, hey, Jenin, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, got up this morning, got a couple calls done for a couple short projects that stunt performer friends of ours want to do, and just kind of getting things in motion.
Cool, man. I want to start off by showing your demo,
All right.
which I'm just checking the live here and making sure we have audio. We do. Everything's good. So we're going to start by showing your, I think it's 2019 demo, and
Hmm.
it's going to make you small on the screen, and hopefully you can talk over it. This is the first time I'm using video on this, so we'll cross our fingers. But you can talk about whatever you want in here, and we'll talk after it. But this is your demo, which is very cool. Here we go. So that's very cool that you jumped over that
Yeah,
rooftop
I
there.
honestly, yeah. I can't see the demo from here because it's lagged by like I want to say 10 seconds.
Ah, there's
And I
lag.
can
Okay,
still,
so
yeah, I
I'll
can
talk
still,
about it. You're fighting,
yeah.
and we'll go back and look at it too in a second.
Actually put the whole thing together. Those raw tidbits and pieces of things that I'd previously worked on. If you, so I've memorized a lot of it. Some of the first shots were individual stuff that we did for previs work. Some of it was for practice scenes so that we understood how to move the camera. And the huge roof gap you saw was when I was doing parkour, and I like to challenge myself before I got paid to do some of this crazy stuff. Um, it just coming from a circus background, it helps a lot. Um,
Cool. I didn't know that. So that's our first question. You were working with the circus, so you do parkour, you do fire, you do stunts, and how did you get into all of this? That's the first question.
uh, Super long story, but it took a lot of bad situations to get me to a very specific point where I was out playing zombie tag with a couple of friends. I used to have my own parkour team. We used to travel the country and do live shows and competitions. Jumped around and ended up tagging a friend of mine while we were jumping from building to building at a town square, and ended up doing a flip with a twist. It's called a corkscrew. This was in 2010, 2009, something like that. And in that process, people were watching. So an individual, this older gentleman, comes out with his kid and he says, hey, what was that little flip thing you just did there? I'm just like, oh, corkscrew. So he's like, hey, do you mind if I get that on camera? Sure. I used to getting people say, hey, do a backflip. So I was like, not bad. Did the skill. He looks at it. He's like, have you ever been on television before? And my first response was, well, we've done indie stuff once, And he's like, you know what? Let me get your number. We'll talk. We'll talk. And from that point on, he just kind of left. He told me, hey, my name's Russell Towery. And it didn't make much sense to me. I was supposed to know who he was. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But in the process, one of my friends Googles it, and he's staring at his phone. He's like, dude, that was RoboCop. Freaks out. So RoboCop found me jumping off of buildings, and he was the guy in the suit, not the actor.
Mm-hmm.
So stunt performer. He's a stunt coordinator. Next thing I know, I'm working with Colin Hanks like within a week, and on The Good Guys, and I'm having to jump over this vehicle and do all this stuff, and he says, they're not paying you enough to do what you're doing right now. And he just laughs, and I'm like, hi, it's the most money I've ever seen in my life. I grew up poor, so it was one
Mm-hmm.
of those things. And after that day, the mentality is from any basic person who's not done film, in an actual film set, you get on set, and for some reason or another, after people see you, you get famous. That's the concept, right? It's like everybody was like, oh, well, now you're gonna get famous, you're gonna do all these things, and that's not how it works at all. The day came around, and it was just on TV, and it was great. I had a good 30, 40-second parkour run with all this random stuff with them chasing me, and that was it. That was the end of that. I didn't know how to get into the film business. He mentioned that same day, hey, if you want to come back, I can show you around. I can't pay you, but you can come check out what we do. I didn't realize what he was saying. To me, that said, hey, I can't pay you, but if you show up, you can watch stuff. But watching stuff wasn't really processing in my head. All I was thinking is, I still got to pay bills. I can't keep missing work, especially when you grow up poor, that mentality is kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made a huge difference. I didn't have the finances, the savings to be able to do just anything I wanted at the time. And so I said, I'm sorry, but I can't keep missing work. He said, okay, and he left. I didn't realize he was offering me a mentorship. And because he didn't say that,
Right.
so to him, that's what he was saying. But to me, somebody who was extremely green, first time on set, performing this thing, which is normal to me, but he's thinking it's crazy. I didn't understand the concept of mentorship. I had no idea. And so it was a missed opportunity. But with that being said, that was my intro to everything. And I've worked for him since. He hired me on a couple other things. But it took a long time for me to progress from where I was and figure out how to really get into the business. It's a different world. So
Very cool. And when you say the business, like, are you working on sets now and on TV shows now? Because, like, well, obviously everything's shut down, but like the last couple of years, because Atlanta is a huge hub for all the shooting.
so when I say the business, I definitely mean the film business. So I like to consider myself not just a stunt performer, I'm a filmmaker, right? And I think that's a concept that anybody who's passionate about the art of creating film is just you're gonna wear multiple hats. When you're on set, particularly, it's my primary role to be a stunt performer. Ideally, push on to fight coordinator, stunt coordinator, rigger, anything that continues around that layout to keep working. The So getting into this business is a little bit different, and I know that right now with all this virus stuff, we've been on this huge hiatus where nobody's been working. I believe they're starting up next week. Some of my friends are actually in the process of getting up there with Tyler Perry and other studios, which they're having to quarantine themselves for like 2 weeks
Yep.
at that studio until they're done shooting their particular thing. Um, but with that in mind, the way that you get into this business is a little bit different than how you would get into another business. Everywhere else, you have an agent, you have somebody who's going to be able to guide you and things of that nature. Here, it's a smaller group, and this smaller group requires people to know you. I know people say that it's a who you know business, but it really isn't. It's a who knows you and how much do they like you. And then after that, it's how skilled are you to keep that job. So it takes hustling. You create a headshot resume and you go onto sets and you find the stunt coordinator, you do your research and you connect with that coordinator. And by the, third to fifth time, if you've got a look they want or if you've got a skill they want or somebody has, just vouched for you, you're able to get a job. They will find a way. Stunt coordinators are very good about this. They'll find a way to make sure that you can work, whether it's just safetying, doing ND work, which is nondescript, or doing some sort of job that requires a minor stunt, and then that way they can gauge your skill level to where they'll trust you to start working your way up the ladder till eventually you're part of the core team. So,
Right.
yeah.
Very cool. All right. That's a lot more information than I expected from you, and it's very cool because I was just talking to Art David, who you had just seen his podcast. He's a visual effects supervisor. He's been in the business for 40 years, and he said the same exact thing. I was just editing that on the computer this morning, which is it's who you know and if they like you. It's not a resume or a headhunter or anything like that. It's just you build up a reputation and people know of you, and all the jobs are word of mouth. And I don't know if you know this guy. His name is Justin O'Neill Miller. I interviewed him. He's an art director and he's working on the new Christopher Nolan movie, Tenet. He worked on it, art directing it, and he also is working on the new rock movie, Black Adam, and he worked on The Walking Dead. And anyway, he said the same exact thing. It's just people call him and say, "Are you available?" Because he's been doing it for 20 years. But the interesting thing, this is a little side story I told yesterday to these filmmakers in Liverpool, England.
Right.
These four guys who make short films is that he also makes short films, but he wants to make a feature, and he didn't know how to make a feature. He knew how to make a feature, but he didn't know how to raise money for the feature. So there was another guy I had interviewed, Jim Issa, who had done that before, and I got them in touch with each other. So it's all word of mouth. It's all who you know. It's just putting yourself out there on podcasts and any TV or radio stuff that you can get. It's just anything is good to get exposure. So we're going to go to a fight scene next. And I want you to there is a delay, but it's the one in the warehouse. And I'm just going to play it full screen. So I can see it live right now. Maybe you'll see a little bit of delay, but if you can just talk about that day and what you were trying to accomplish. It's starting right now where this guy is walking towards you in the warehouse with all the graffiti.
Awesome. So actually, this was closer to December, and I decided to go and take those guys that you see there, and I took them from Atlanta and took them on a road trip back home from Texas. I'm from Texas, so I was born in California, raised in Texas, and this was one of the places where I learned to rappel. It was an abandoned incendiary, and I thought the production value was just beautiful, and I'd just gotten a nice.
Looks great.
So
and now you guys are starting to fight, which I don't have the sound, but the sound makes it seem very real.
Yeah, so that was the sound effects. I picked up the sound from the ambient, and then I just mixed it with just specific sound effects that you can get stock anywhere. But there was only one sound that's real, and that's the very end where you see the scorpion where I land on my shoulder. I land on the right shoulder, my head goes to the side, and it looks like I smack, and you hear this thud.
Yeah.
That was the actual sound of the scorpion. There was no added effect to that. So when you hear that little bit of brutalness, that's there. So the guy I'm fighting, his name is Chris Schmidt, and he's actually done some really cool work. Stranger Things. He was one of the guys doubling on Stranger Things. So he's an amazing tricker. Does some really cool stuff. You should check out his stuff at some point. But he and I came up with the fight choreography on the spot. We took about 10-15 minutes to kind of block out how we wanted to move, and we went ahead and built the entire choreography, ran through it, and had one of my other stunt performers, Jessica Williams, also a very cool person you should look up. She ended up filming it for us. It was she wanted to get more behind camera, so we gave her the opportunity, and I just kind of explained to her how I wanted the shots, and we went through that choreography. The reactions that you see him take when he's moving left and right, uh, they're actually not even remotely close to each other. It just looks a lot tighter than it is based on camera angle and positioning of camera. And
Right.
so because of his skill level, he's able to respond to my movement right on cue, almost like if you're dancing with a partner. Um, Built into all that, we got into different camera positions to sell certain hits better. The last shot that you see there when I end up taking my final rec is one that is very prominent in hero movies, is when they've done their final blow and they're kind of towering over the other person. You get this kind of parallax with that person there, where if the camera moves, the smaller person looks like they're moving, but they're not. And it's a really good shot to have. We definitely changed some lenses here and there, so it's always good to know your lenses. But for the most part, it was done in about 2 hours. Very simple, very quick. And then the very last shot where you see the end there, where it's this ultra wide, and it's from really far out, and you're seeing him walk away. That's actually not me on the ground. I am standing about 6 stories up on a lip that's maybe 2 feet wide. That used to be part of a cage that would travel across to pick up debris. So there's no safety up there, but I wanted the shot so bad, I decided to go up there. And one of my other friends stood in for me with my wardrobe
Okay.
and laid down there, and I shot it from up there so nobody else would have to risk themselves to get up there. I don't recommend you do that.
No.
When you're on a budget of $0, and you know what shots you want to get as a creative, it gets kind of you know kind of interesting. But since I've done parkour most of my life, standing on a lip like that was just another day.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask you. I think I have another video. It's called Jenin Jump, and I think it's you jumping across a building. Like, I saw some of the parkour that you did on YouTube, and you're running and jumping, and you're literally like barely making it with your hands or your feet just grab an edge. Like,
Yeah.
obviously you've fallen before. Have you gotten seriously injured?
So that's a tough question. So just like most athletes, I've probably gotten injured on like simple things more than I have on complicated things. The amount of focus is different at certain points in time, and it's always when you say, "All right, last one," or just one more, that usually messes you up because you lose your concentration.
Right.
So uh, I've torn my quad. And actually, it's still partially torn. I did not get it fixed. I went and did some stuff. That was probably my worst one that I've ever done. I did what's called a palm flip. So you backflip off of a wall with your hands. And on this particular one, I had been training since 9 a.m. all the way. It was like 11 p.m. at that point. We used to go full 8 hour days, but some days you had open gym, so we wanted to run through open gym. And then if we found a cool spot, we would go to that spot. I ran and there was grass, then mulch, then a wall. I would run, step on the wall, jump up about 5 feet, press with my hands, and do a backflip off the wall. And then as I was doing it, I said the thing I should have said, one more. My friends were ready to go. I did not realize that in the time we were out there, by the time we were about to leave, the grass had gotten due. I ran, I stepped on the grass, stepped on the wall, my foot slipped. I was 7 feet up at this point in time. My hands were supposed to push. I just thought, reach for the wall, push, continue on. My hands missed, scraped the wall. I thought to myself, tuck, I'm high enough to rotate. I did not rotate. I was about to land on my neck. I was upside down. So I thought to myself, rotate to a quarter so you'll land on your side. Worst that's going to happen is you'll distribute the weight across your body. I land and I feel this super sharp pain. I mean, it was extreme, but I just laid there for a second to figure out what it was. I didn't move. I come to find that what I had landed on, that I had not even touched or contemplated, was that there was a metal divider in between the grass and the mulch, and it was sticking out about 3 inches. I went from 7 feet to my thigh, all the way down onto that thin metal divider, which immediately snapped my muscle. It just shaped through it, but it did not cut, which was the interesting part. It did not cut anything due to the thickness of my sweats, but it tore the muscle. And then I didn't know how bad it was. I could stand up. I could tell there was something there. I thought maybe I'd broken my femur. It was that painful, but I didn't realize the amount of pain that was going to come next. So I took my friend home. It took an hour for me to get back home, and I had to walk up 2 flights of stairs. Once I tried to get out of my car after sitting down for an hour, the adrenaline rush was gone, and my leg had started swelling. I tried to move my leg, and it was excruciatingly painful. Since I was a fire performer at the time for the circus and did some stuff like that, I had my fire staff, so I used it. It looked like Rafiki walking across.
Mm.
It took me like 15 minutes just to get to my door, and I wasn't very far. So I get up there, and then I can't get out of bed for 4 days.
Oof.
Would not get out of bed. I had to call in and tell them, hey, I can't go to work. And I was teaching gymnastics at the time. And because of it, like it took 2 weeks for it to finally start bruising. And they told me that I would have to have it wired back into place, but I didn't want to go through surgery. So they told me it was going to take like 8 months to a year to heal. 3 months later, I'm starting to rehab it and condition it, break down the scar tissue. Just from being an athlete, you kind of know how to take care of your body a little bits at a time. And by the time I was done, 6 months later, like I could jump in. 3 months in, I could finally jump and move, have agility. 6 months later, I was jumping further and faster than I was prior to. So, yeah.
Crazy, man, crazy. So I'm gonna just see. Let me just see what this video is, and then I want to ask you about parkour because I saw a video. They were actually replicating Assassin's Creed, the video game or something, but these guys were on a rooftop in France, and they were
Yeah.
literally on a cathedral, and they were running on top of the. And if you fall, that's like 5, 6 stories. It's a big difference from a story or two. It's like way up there. And they were just jumping on the edges of these things. And I was like, that is so crazy, man. And you can get really messed up just from doing a story or two. But if you're 6 stories, you're not going to make it. So they had a steady cam operator who was running with them, and it was such crazy footage. But I want to ask you about the mindset of parkour and the danger. And like you said, you're just focused and you're hopping around. But let me see what this is. I'm just going to play this. Okay, so that's just a photo of you jumping off of a 2 story parking deck. So that's not any footage, but can you talk about that? Can you talk about because we
Um,
just saw a video of you jumping across
I'm not
buildings.
sure which one you're looking at, but I mean, there's so much footage out there. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like we've gone through content upon content.
Well,
That's all
sorry to interrupt. Let me just ask you, like, parkour, if you can just talk about
the mentality.
the mentality, the mindset of parkour, and you just get used to being dangerous all the time?
So that's the question, right? So my mom would look at me and she'd be like, "Ay, mijo, please don't die," like because there's just so going back, I'm Hispanic. My lineage derives from Spain. My mom's from Mexico. My grandparents are from Spain. Um, but one of the things that was always really hard for her to see was me doing all these things and her having to accept the fact that she wasn't going to be able to change much of what I do. The difference is an individual who doesn't do what we do looks at it and thinks you're about to die, right? There are, I want to say, about 4 levels of training. Your first level is your basics and your fundamentals, and with that, you can get what's called crunching your ankle, rolling your ankles. You can scrape your knees, you can scrape your elbows, and nothing really bad comes from it. It's what most people will teach you in a gym, and you'll kind of get used to. There's the second level of parkour, which is then sprains, cuts. That's where you're starting to need, stitches here and there, or you're out for a few weeks because you rolled an ankle, potentially minor fractures. Then there's level three, which is major breaks, concussions, and things that can severely damage you, like tears that you're going through. And then there's level four, which is you mess up, you die. That's it.
Yeah.
And so level one is your basics. Level two is intermediate stuff. So you're learning how to do bigger vaults, bigger runs, bigger jumps, anywhere from 10 to 11 feet, somewhere around there, doing all those for running precisions, places that are comfortable, and trying to figure out your landings. Level three would be trying to go full out, like as much as possible, with zero holdback on your power, but everything's within reason. So it's like either ground level for your full power stuff, or you're cutting a little bit under full power, but you're maybe a story high. So stuff like that won't kill you, but it will definitely injure you very bad, especially if you're doing it onto rails and things of that nature. And then there's the fourth level, which is where you start experimenting beyond your means, which is 5 feet is 5 feet no matter where you're at, even if you're 50 stories in the air. The only difference is the wind. That's the air resistance and following, whether it's against you or with you. So you start calculating things like that, and you start going, okay, well, I know I can jump 15 feet, and I know I can stick my landings, and I've checked both sides of this. You look at it, you take a moment, you breathe, you go back, you come back to it, and if your body says you're ready, and you get one shot to do it. This is all or nothing type of environment. We had a location called Dead Man's Drop is what they called it. Some of the parkour guys once upon a time would joke about jumping that gap, and it was in Dallas. It was a 3-story drop with it was a plain run, the flattest run. It was to a kind of like a shopping center made out of concrete. The gap was about 14 feet wide, but the height difference was maybe 5 feet, right? You had to jump up 5 feet and travel 14. So you really had to be aggressive with your power. But the thing you were landing on was a small slab of concrete that was like this, and maybe this much space, so about an inch and a half to 2 inches that you had to stick your landing on. You couldn't cat it, which is where you land feet first and catch a wall and hang on there. You couldn't cat it because there was no bottom. So the wall would maybe extend 2 to 3 feet, and if you try to hang your feet on there and you missed, there was 3 stories under you of nothing. It's just a random patio. So it was like floating on top of concrete.
Yeah.
So nobody wanted to do it. One day I remember being there, and I showed up, and my friend was there, and I said, you know what, I'm doing it. And that's all I thought. I got up there, cleaned off my hands, cleaned off my shoes, looked at it, ran back, I turned around. I'm like, I'm probably not going to ever want to try this again. Ran at it, was the first one to do it, and it was sloppy, but I landed on top, hit it, and jumped off. And moments like that, like I look at them now and I'm like, man, I could have died. Like that could have been it for me. But my confidence level and my skill level at the time was something that I was extremely confident in. When you train something, you were talking about landing on the edges of things, and it looks like you barely just make it.
Yeah.
It's actually called a precision, where you land somewhere precisely where you need to land. And the foot has 3 major points: the ball of the foot, right? The arch of the foot, and then the heel of the foot. If you land heels, it'll slip you off. You'll push your momentum forward. There's nothing to control. If you land arches, you will crunch and potentially break your metatarsals. If you land ball of the foot, that is your cushioning point. It is the only place that has spring. So your job is to, if this is the wall, is to land with the balls of the feet there and press forward and crimp with the toes to be able to absorb that shock. And so when you see them land and barely make it, it's actually intentional to land that way, so that they're able to get that full control and absorb the shock with the quads and calves while controlling their chest. It's very technical, and it takes a very long time, and not a lot of people make it to that level.
Right. And I saw something where you jumped onto a tree, and it was a very thin tree, and it was like you almost had the power to go through the tree and snap it in half, but you just stopped dead in your tracks. Do you remember that in one of your videos?
That one was a 16-foot gap, and I used a really large step up to get that power and lift to be able to create the arc and grab onto the tree. When that happened, actually, that one I did it for me. That was another major injury that ended up happening, and it's something that I learned early on. So we used to be sponsored by NOS Energy Drinks. My team was called PK Out, Parkour, Over, Under, and Through. Nice little acronym. And so they were wanting to shoot this video, promotional video with NOS energy drinks and, and all this stuff. So we would put their little logo, we would do a parkour jump, and they would just pitch it. You know what I mean? It ended up being that I wanted to do this jump. I'd never done it before. The tree was approximately 4 to 5 inches wide, and it was slanted. So if this was my runway here, it was 16 feet, but not in a straight line. It was off center. It was slanted off to a little bit angled. So I had to run at an angle, step off, jump diagonally, and catch it. When I went for that first jump, I hit it. I tested it out. One foot has to land on bottom, one foot has to land on top, and you're able to absorb the shock properly. I did it the first time and tapped off just to see if I could grab onto the tree. It was perfect. Second time, they were ready to roll. I got overconfident. I decided I was going to go for it and change my technique a little just to give it a little more glide. I messed up. My first foot hit the tree. My second foot slid, and I smashed my knee into the tree. I fell, and there was big stone on the bottom. I fell, immediately tried to roll, but I smashed my knee into the rock, and I rolled out. It looked like I had a secondary kneecap. That took me out for about 6 weeks before I could start jumping properly again. So I did a lot of one-legged stuff and a lot of handstands.
Right.
So then I went back a year later, and that run to that tree was specifically for me. Nobody was there. Nobody was there to hype me up or give me motivation. I knew that I had to go and challenge myself to be better. So I went and I trained that specific thing for 6 months. And then I came back and I looked at it, and it was one of those things when you're a parkour athlete, when you're a free runner, your job is you take the most pride in overcoming fear. Fear becomes the social norm to the point where nothing really scares you. You just judge it based on logic, not emotion. And that's why we're able to do as much as we do. It's not primarily that, oh man, this jump looks scary. I've stood up on top of buildings like that front flip that you saw, in the demo. You look at them and people are like, well, what if you fall? And you look at those kind of people and say, well, I'm not going to fall. It's like, what do you mean? There's a huge drop there. Yeah, but we don't look at the drop. We look at our destination. We look at where we're going. I know that I can jump this amount. I know I can jump 16 feet, right? I know I cannot jump 16 feet 1 inch. That 1 inch will take me 2 years to get that 1 inch better, right? Once I reach my max potential. Because your learning curve spikes up at the beginning, then you level out, then it spikes up, and then you level out, and then after the second level out, it gets so much harder to increase your power. You have to go weight lift, you have to do all these random things. But we know measurement. We understand our ability to push forward. So when we look at something, we're looking at the distance, and we judge it, and we say, I've done this gap before. It's just been somewhere else. And then from there, we just are able to click, and it just goes. It's kind of like if you're a gymnast and you're training at somebody else's facility. Doesn't matter. You're still the same gymnast,
Right.
Different baseball field, different soccer field, different hockey stick.
Right.
Your technique stays the same.
Yeah, I totally get it. So let me ask you a question, and then I want to go on to fire, and then I want to wrap it up with advice you have for younger people who want to get into stunts and being a stunt double and stuff like that, and then we'll just talk about your website and your YouTube and all that. But before we do that, I created something here. Let me see if I can find it here. The question is the greatest stunt of all time. I don't think you can see the text yet, but what do you think is the greatest stunt of all time in any movie? To mind, for me, it comes to like a Matrix thing. There's probably a bunch of stunts in the Matrix movies that are really cool. But what do you think? Some of that's special effects. What do you think personally is the greatest stunt you've ever seen?
Man, I'll tell you, there's some crazy ones out there, but I want to say, was it Guy Norris? If you go check out this video, it's I believe he's Australian, or he did it in Australia. I don't remember which one it was. Don't quote me.
Yeah.
This video, him doing the most amazing high fall with a decelerator. A decelerator is essentially a line that stops you from hitting the ground and it gradually slows you down before you hit there. He is doing this diving commercial and he is jumping off, and it looks like he's jumping off in a Speedo. I don't remember, it's been a long time since I've seen it. But he jumps off, and it is the highest jump anybody has ever done. And he has to do it off of a building. And the riggers on there are amazing. Props to those guys. They were able to set up his line and everything. And they calculated for everything. I mean, wind, air resistance, just the amount of sheer like knowledge to be able to execute this was amazing. On the day, and I mean, they went through every single X factor to make sure that he did not move into that building. He moves into the building, he's dead. Um, on the day, this man has no fear. He just runs full speed and does his thing, man. And he jumps and he goes, and you see them story by story by story by story. Nowadays, they would just CG it, you know? But then he just kind of went for it and he almost scrapes wall, man. He gets super close. Even with all the mathematical equations, he almost scrapes wall.
Right.
And somehow magically he gets away from it and they decel him. And it was a one and done. Nobody in the world will ever do it again. It has never been done before. And it was one of those things. I mean, there's so many amazing stunts out there. Um, but I will say that was one of the most impressive that I've seen.
And is there somewhere people can see that? Is it on YouTube, and is it called?
To I don't remember what it's called, but if you just look for like the world's highest high fall, I'm
Okay.
sure you'll find it. It's a commercial, but it's incredible. And another thing, it's there's a difference between being a daredevil and being a stunt performer. And you know, one of the coordinators you would say that the difference is take two. You know, because a daredevil can go for their stuff, and there's no guarantee that he's going to make it and be safe. We worry so much about safety and keeping our performers alive and making sure that we don't go through some of the big learning curves that some of the older gentlemen that have gone through it, the old school cats that have done stunts have gone through. They learned those mistakes so that we wouldn't have to. And they've gone through a lot, and I don't think it's appreciated. Nowadays we use pads and gear and harnesses that are so snug. When those guys went, no pads, straight to the concrete every single time, hitting the ground, hitting hard, and they had to sell it. And they had to be extremely diverse. I mean, there's like so many different things you can do. You can do equestrian, you can do, martial arts, you can do rigging, you can do fire, you can do sports, you can do diving. I mean, there's just so many things within this one profession, and they had to be extremely good at everything. Nowadays, people can choose a kind of
They're
a
more
direct
specialized.
because things are not as either they're more technical nowadays, but not as difficult due to how far technology has advanced. Nowadays we don't do as many high fall. Airbags are not needed. We got wires. Most things are done with wires for nearly everything nowadays. And if they can't do it with wires, they'll CG it. So I will say, Stunts has done a lot for people, and I don't think it's appreciated as much as it should be. It doesn't get as much recognition as it should. Some people think that it's a dying art, where in the future we may not need as many stunt performers. But that can all change in a heartbeat, depending on what it is that the film industry decides to do. With that in mind, I mean,
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you this. I want to talk about the fire stuff that you do because it's really cool. I'm going to show a video that's from YouTube, and in the beginning, you're on a parking deck. It's dark, and it looks like fire, and you're kind of swirling it around. And then towards the end of the video, you're also swirling it around. And I'm just going to turn it on right here. You're also swirling it around, but it looks almost like embers versus flames. So, can you talk about that and talk about like what you're
yeah.
doing there?
So the parkour aspect can relate to stunts. The fire stuff that you see there, That's not necessarily stunts. That's more from the circus world. We do have two different styles of fire if you want to talk about pyro.
Mm-hmm.
But that day specifically, I went out. They paid me to go out there. One of the gentlemen that was doing camera work for Queen of the South,
Okay.
uh, he was the guy that filmed it.
All right.
And so he came out and asked me to do just some basic fire breathing. I said, "Are you sure? I've got so many other things that I can do." He's like, "Oh, like what?" And I explained it to him, and then I showed him, and he's like, "I want that." And so we started doing that. I was a fire performer for a very long time. I eat fire, breathe fire, spin fire, like just a whole bunch of different things for the circus. Um, what you see, the one with the spikes, that one is called a dragon staff. The dragon staff rotates one direction and it rolls around your body in contact, and it keeps momentum going. So it's really difficult to stop the motion without making it look bad. It's all about flow. The one that you saw me touch the end and then light the secondary piece, that was a contact staff. Basic staff is like martial arts staff, where you spin around your body. Contact staff, you don't use your hands. You allow it to kind of flow
Right.
around your person. And the way that you're able to do that is by, instead of trying to catch the staff, you put yourself under the center point of balance at all times. So you let it roll and you're always making micro adjustments to put yourself under its balance point. Once it carries momentum, you start to figure out if you need to be off balance and have the center point off so that it rotates around in a different pattern, but you use its momentum and its rotation. What you see there at the end with the cages,
Mm-hmm.
those are it's fire poi, but those are I made those at home. Those are cages with charcoal in them. So what you do is you crush charcoal, and what you're seeing fly around is actually fragments of the charcoal. And so
Ah, okay. It's charcoal. I was wondering how you got those sparks because they look really cool, and they also look really cool because they're kind of slow mo
mhm,
um,
they'll
at
fly.
different speeds. Yeah.
Yeah, so they look like when you see them outside and you do this performance, it covers a range about 20 to 30 feet. And so you have to really stay back because it's still dangerous. But they look like fireflies. They look like very bright fireflies,
Yeah.
and they look amazing. So people really enjoy that. It's definitely a crowd pleaser. I don't use them often unless I have the spacing, but for camera, he wanted to see depth, and that was definitely a way to do it.
Yeah. And you also do a little fire breathing there. And then when this video's over, I have a picture of you just blowing two chunks of fire. Oh, you kind of do it in the video too. So
Yes.
how do you do that? You put
So
literally like kerosene in your mouth, or
no, no, don't try
what is
that.
that? I don't know.
Don't do that
Don't do
one.
that. No, how does that work?
So I'm not going to tell you guys what I use because it's just anybody who finds is going to try it, and I
It's a
don't
secret.
recommend.
Okay, okay.
It's not necessarily a secret. If you get into it's called flow arts. If you get into flow arts and you learn your basics and you train with people, you will find out their techniques, and you'll learn how to do it safely. But I'd rather not be one of those YouTube guys who just gives you information and good luck, guys.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so but to be honest, the so that's called a split, right? So there's two different ones that I do. A double is where you put one finger here and it'll create two holes, which
Hmm.
allows it to split out, and you have to have a very clean technique on your breathing. So the stuff we use does not combust unless you atomize it, which is the oxygen particles in between are combusting. It's not the actual fuel. So when we put it on our mouths, I can try to light my mouth on fire and it won't do anything. However, rule number one is don't breathe in. If you're around fire, rule number one is don't breathe in. Breathing in could cause a lot of problems. So that's that one. There's another one we call the trident, which is two fingers and it creates one, two, and three, and that one takes a lot of practice. Um, in there, you should have seen a fire breathing backflip. I am one of maybe 100 people in the world who can do a fire breathing backflip or who have done it.
Very
And
cool.
then I was the first person in the world to do a fire breathing corkscrew, which is that twisting flip, and then there was a fire breathe in the middle. On camera, when you catch it in slow motion, it wraps my whole body around the flame. That day there was a lot of wind, so it made it really difficult. But whenever you get a nice calm day with no wind, the entire thing will snake around my body long enough for you to see it trailing like a dragon. So it's really cool to watch. There's a lot of different techniques, and just like any other art, fire is evolving. And if we're going to take it back to stunts and talk about fire, we've lit a couple guys on fire. I've got lit on fire. It's two different worlds, whole different experiences, and it's something that you don't do right off the bat. But when you do end up doing a like fire burn, you start off with partial burns so that you can see what it's like having to control the flame on your arm or on your leg, and then from there you can go into full body burns if you have a good safety on set and coordinators that know how to deal with that.
Very cool. So, can you talk about? I'm going to bring up this Jenin jump pick, and it's you basically jumping off a two-story parking deck into the stuff below. Is that in your demo? I don't remember.
I'm sure it's somewhere.
It's somewhere. Can you just
um,
talk about that? Because that's kind of like a crazy stunt.
so let's talk about physics, okay?
Okay.
Um, so I learned a lot. So in high school, I learned very little. I was terrible at high school. It took gymnastics to really get me to focus because if you don't pass, you don't compete was the only thing that got me going. Um, but essentially, what ends up happening, a drop straight up and down, when you're absorbing that shock, you're taking 100% of that impact. However, if you're able to draw a line across, creating a nice little arc, and continuing forward momentum before you hit the ground, it dissipates a lot of that impact. So you hit a cross shoulder roll, which is from shoulder to hip. As you're landing, you either land feet together or you stagger, and you come across the shoulder, and all that energy travels from your arm across to your back and all the way back to your feet and continues in the run.
Hmm.
So a lot of people that have strong legs, strong cores, are able to take these drops, particularly because of the way that the energy is traveling. If you were to drop a ball straight down, it'll hit harder than if you were to let it go out. The momentum just kind of travels out. The bounces are smaller, and that's kind of what we go for. So that roll is really essential. You get to see the cool stuff while it's in the air, but people don't really contemplate the amount of time and dedication it takes to build up those muscles and figure out the proper technique. Once you do it, you can do it on the concrete and you won't feel a thing.
Right. And before we get to your website and your YouTube channel and all that, can you just give advice, however you want to do it, to younger people who love parkour, love stunts, want to get into the same kind of business that you're doing?
Um, yeah. Ethnicity says a lot about you. Your height says a lot about you. This business is not for people who are not ready to be rejected. This business is extremely harsh. There are extremely good people in it, but the film industry calls for a specific style of doing things. Number one is your look. If you have a look, you're better off than if you don't have a look. I do not have a specific look. I'm a short guy and I don't fit the standard of doubling somebody. So most of the stuff that I'll do is through primarily stunt acting or playing my own character or doing ND stuff. The only times I've doubled are when they've needed somebody with specific talents. Um, with that in mind, as long as you don't give up, you'll get there. It's if you're playing this game, it's not to win, it's to play. You're playing the game for the longest term for the rest of your life. It may mean that you may get one opportunity in 3 years, and then the next year you may get two. But at the end of the day, it's your persistence, your ability to be humble, your ability to want to learn, and to keep yourself advancing every step of the way, even without anybody helping you, that's going to get you there. So if I have one piece of advice for you, is never stop learning and never stop studying your craft.
And how would you recommend that? Like, I'm curious. Obviously, to take a martial arts class is obvious, but if people want to get into parkour, is it just going and hanging out with the people who do the parkour, and eventually they'll let you do some stunt people? How would you say? Are there classes for stunts and fighting?
So, broad question. To learn parkour and martial arts, yeah, do that. Is it a requirement? No. I have friends who've never taken a day of martial arts in their life and they look so good at fighting on film. Real fighting versus film fighting are two different things.
Hmm.
And real fighting doesn't look good on camera. So you have to learn film fighting. Having a base and background in martial arts helps you a lot because it shows you those stances and the footwork that you're going to need in the future. However, if you want to learn, it's find the people, find out where they train, and see if you can join them. If you are in the business and you aren't getting work, you're still in the business. You're just terrible at the business. That's all it is. That's my one of my mentors, John Can. That's what he would tell me. He's like, you're in the film business. Never say you're not in the film business. You're just really bad at it. So get better. Is what he would say.
I like that.
It's like running your own company. If you're not making any sales, it's probably your fault, right? So you gotta remember, you are a product. When you're in the film business, when you're freelance, you yourself are a product. Your job is to maintain that product, to be able to give it a specific brand, to be able to give yourself some sort of look and some sort of pitching point so that when you approach these people, you're able to say, hey, I know you have all this in hand already. I know there's not much I can offer, but here's what makes me different and here's what sets me aside. Here is my quality content that I can provide for you. And that statement will take you a lot further. And it may not work the first time. It may not work the first 100 times. But if it takes you 101 times to get one sell, and it takes this guy 20, and you want to get to where he's at, you just have to sell about 200,000 cells and you'll be able to get there.
Right.
Just remember, persistence is important. So,
Awesome, man. So let's let everybody know where they can see your stuff. It's on YouTube. What's the name of your channel? And you also have like a stunt performer website.
to be honest, I have a lot of different little sections. If you want to find me, just contact me. You have any questions, get involved, get in contact. I'll always give you information. I think knowledge is something that should be shared, not should be kept secret. So I will always answer your questions. With that in mind, there's plenty of places where you can find people like me or myself. My stuff, you just look up Jenin Gonzalez, Jeningonzalez. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube with that simple phrasing there. They're all under that. I also have my website, one of my websites, my personal one, which is more of a blog website right now, which is jeninmovement.com. And I'm currently under development of my new brand, which will be Second Unit Stunts LLC, which has also the website on there. So that one will be coming within the next few months or so. So keep that going. But with that being said, if you want to find out more about stunts and you're really curious, there's plenty of stunt directories. You'll be able to find people's headshots and resumes and how they do things. You'll be able to get good information on how to set those things up and what they're looking for and how people sell themselves. There's my personal favorite run by Joannis Candice, which is, you should look her up. She's an incredible stunt performer. Oh my God. She's definitely set the pace for African American stunt women around the world. And so she runs Stunt POC, so Stunt People of Color, or Performers of Color. And so she's got a website, she's got everything. If you're interested, she's such a sweet person. She will help you as well. I know there's places like iStunt. I know there's places that you can go to. Some of them require you to be union. So my first thing for you would be find places where you can train, start doing projects with people who are training. Those people will eventually be able to get you your SAG card. That SAG card will give you some sort of validation to be able to work on set. And then people will continue spreading your name. And as long as you keep a positive outlook and a hardworking demeanor, people will continue to want to work with you. And it takes a little while. It takes about 5 years. But within 5 years, you should be able to get work. And I know it's a lot of time to put in, but it's part of anything. It's the long game.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, that's pretty much the standard for getting into film.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. We usually do about 45, but you had so much stuff going on. We did almost an hour. Very cool stuff with the fire and the parkour and jumping off of buildings, man. The fighting, all of it's awesome. So cool to talk to you. Thank you so much. And keep in touch. And hopefully, we'll see you out there in the movies.
Oh, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. And hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Okay. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.